Welcome, everyone. I can see a number of people joining us today. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us today, and a very big welcome to all of you. My name is Suruchi, and I'm the manager of innovation and grid integration team that is responsible for the development of the New South Wales Consumer Energy Resources Installer Portal, as we call it, CER Installer Portal. And I'm representing New South Wales Government Department of Climate Change, Energy, Environment and Water, in short, DQ. Um, as we all know, rooftop solar is essential to help achieve net zero emissions, low energy costs, and it is supporting a clean energy transition. In New South Wales, solar installations are increasing at a pace never seen before. So, to ensure the stability in the grid and to allow room for more installations in the coming years, there are changes coming to how you install solar generating systems. So, today in this room, there are a number of installers, retailers, and the wider industry. We are here to inform you the changes which will be coming in mid next year on how you install solar generating systems. In this webinar, you'll hear all about the changes on how those changes are going to affect and be implemented in New South Wales. You will learn more about emergency backstop mechanism, as well as the New South Wales CER installer portal, which will be launching in 2026 to support these changes and yourself and the whole industry. Can I have my next slide? Thanks, Sophie. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the Aboriginal and the Torres Strait Islander people as the traditional custodians of Australia. I am today dialing in today from the Darug country, and I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I do also recognize the very strong and the continuing connection the First Nations communities have to their lands, waters, and cultures. And I'd like to acknowledge the communities we all work with across New South Wales. Now, I'd like to introduce the many experts we have in the room today as my co-speakers from New South Wales Department of Climate Change, Energy and Environment, Water. We've got John Debrun. John, could you give a little wave? And myself. So we are here John is a CER portal stakeholder engagement lead. And we'll be talking about CER installer portal in a while. From Ausgrid, we've got Adam Bradford, who's a connection manager for urban development. Thanks, Adam, lovely in blue shirt there. From Endeavour Energy, we've got Barton Heller, who's a CER innovation manager. And from Essential Energy, we've got Hamish Wheatley, who's an ASP connections manager. From Energy Networks Australia, we've got Bryn Williams, who's working very closely with DQ as well as the distributed network service providers to help us with a unified approach in New South Wales and also aligning such similar efforts interstate. Hi, Bryn. And last but not the least, we've got Sophie Travers. Sophie, can I have a little wave from you? Sophie is from SEC Newgate, and he'll be facilitating the webinar and our Q&A session moving forward. So moving on to agenda. Today, it's all about emergency backstop mechanism and the New South Wales Consumer Energy Resources portal, the installer portal, which is for you, the installers and the solar industry, which will be introduced next year and which will help deliver the emergency backstop mechanism. The portal will actually enable installers to register and enroll solar systems which are less than or equal to 200 kilowatt to enable the emergency backstop mechanism and meet these mandatory requirements. We will then talk about how New South Wales government is working very closely with the 3 New South Wales distributed network service providers from which we have experts in this room to implement this so that we can support the industry through this change. Never before has this happened that the government has come together with the three distributed network service providers and are providing a unified approach for the installers. We've got John and our experts who will provide some information on what we've learned from other jurisdictions and how we are supporting the industry. What are the changes which will be coming in mid-26 next year for you and that you should be knowing about. And then Sophie will lead a Q&A session. Um, Before I actually hand it over to John, I'd like to thank those of you who've already kind of submitted the questions, and those questions have helped us to shape the information we're sharing with you today. So hopefully we'll get time to answer some of those questions as we go in this webinar. But also, I insist, please continue to submit questions through the Q&A tab. On the top right corner, you would see a Q&A tab. There's a function on the top right, as you can see. So you should be able to post the questions as we go, and Sophie and the team would be able to moderate them and add them to the list. That's it from me. Over to you, John.
Thank you, Suruchi. So in the last 10 years, the design of the grid has become increasingly complex. Rapid growth through renewables and solar rooftop has introduced two-way energy flows into a grid originally designed for one-way transmissions. In 2024, solar accounted for more than half the electricity grid's energy needs at certain times of the day, and it's forecast to reach up to 90 or 100% in coming years. So that shift presents quite a few technical challenges which are needing to be actively addressed to support grid stability and reliability. So typically on mild sunny days, especially weekends, solar exports can exceed demand, and when too much energy is fed into the grid and not enough is drawn out, it creates an imbalance, which can trigger what's known as a minimum system load event, or MSL event you might have heard of, and this increases the risk of outages. So to manage that risk, AEMO has requiring all states, each state to implement what's known as an emergency backstop mechanism, and this will allow the distribution networks to temporarily reduce solar rooftop exports or pause when AEMO notifies the market of those emergency grid conditions. It's important to note that DNSPs will only activate an emergency backstop when asked by the AEMO, Australian Energy Market Operator, in critical MSL events. So to facilitate this, from mid-2026, all new and upgraded rooftop systems up to and including 200 kilowatts will be installed with a protocol known as the CSIP Oz, or Common Smart Inverter Protocol, and enrolled onto DNSP utility servers. Some of that will be more explained by others after this, but that's the change, and what that'll mean is that that enables those systems to be on the emergency backstop mechanism, to work with the emergency backstop mechanism. So all of that's being facilitated through the New South Wales Consumer Energy Resources, or CER, installer portal. It'll do a number of things. Really, it'll support CER installs to register and test the technologies anywhere in New South Wales, so through all three DNSP areas. It'll automatically report the CCEW information and AEMO DER register information. It'll, of course, deliver the emergency backstop mechanism, but also flexible exports possibilities in New South Wales. And it'll also ensure accurate device registration and compliance to some standards that are critical to safety, stability, and unlocking new opportunities. So yeah, there's a bit going on, but it's a big change for industry, and we want to be here to support you. So I'll hand over now to, I think, Barton, to do a bit of a more detail on that.
Yeah, great. Thanks, John. So when we look at doing emergency backstop or flexible exports, these are both technologies in which we want to communicate to an inverter over the internet to be able to send some response controls. In the event of emergency backstop, what you'd be doing is we'd be temporarily reducing exports or generation at the site to make sure we're balancing the load. For flexible exports, it means that we would be able to increase the amount of exports that customers could have, rather than just having a static limit, have a flexible one in place. To do that, though, we need a portal. We need to be able to connect to these devices over the internet, and that's where we're designing this portal. Now, the unique thing here is that you, as the installer, are the ones that are actually commissioning these devices into our control systems. So you're now a very important player in this ecosystem and this portal is to be used by you in doing that. But we do recognise we're adding a layer into what is already a pretty flooded network of systems that you need to use, and we're very conscious of that in the way that we're designing it. So what we've worked hard to do, and John touched on it, is things like the DER register and the CCEW. We wanted to encompass them into this portal so you don't have to go to AEMO's portal or the building commissions in these cases, to try to streamline the workload. The other thing that we worked hard to do is we didn't want to have 3 individual installer portals for each DNSP to do this commissioning work. We wanted to partner with the government and all 3 of the DNSPs to have one single portal that you can use. So that is what we're looking to deliver. So how this works, if we just look at this chart here on the right hand side, you've got 2 main components at the top. So first off is the solar retailer or the admin staff within a business, and you interact with DNSP application portals. That's what you do already today. You submit applications and get permission to connect at the end of that application approval process. That is remaining unchanged. There will still be 3 different application portals for the 3 different DNSPs, and you will be still submitting applications in that. The change that will be in there is that we will get more information about devices, and that the devices you'll be using or the inverters need to be have that CCIP Oz compliance or a software client that the CEC lists on their website. We'll all be looking to align how we do collect the data in those portals. And ultimately, we want to collect a lot more information up front about the panels and the inverters, makes and models that's being connected. Then what we're going to do is send that data over an API to the new installer portal. So all of that information that you've already submitted, makes, models, panel information, is sitting there ready to go. The installer on site can then confirm that that was the information that was installed and provide information like a serial number. And then that will essentially automatically trigger off the DER, AEMO's DER register submission, as well as the CCEW. The last step is connecting it to our control systems. That's what we call our utility server. You'll see down there the red line coming down and then breaking off into the 2 components. We have flexible exports and emergency backstop, both using the same sort of technology, just different signals being sent out. This portal will allow you to test, connect, and make sure that it is working before leaving the site to enable those systems to be in place. So we aren't the first ones in in Australia to do this. This is a complex arrangement, and if we just go to the next slide, what we're doing is we've tried to learn as much as we can from the other states. The way we've approached this portal is heavily leveraging what South Australia has done with their portal. And we also spent a lot of time with the Victorians with how emergency backstop was rolled out for them, for what worked well and what didn't work well, and trying to learn from that. Hence why we're trying to do things like aligning and doing one single portal, and trying to get on the front foot when it comes to both engagement as well as testing with the industry. So what we're going to do now is I'll throw over to Bryn, and he's going to talk through some of how we're aligning from the technical side of things.
Yeah, thanks, Barton. So as Barton said, the New South Wales DNSPs have been doing a lot of work together preparing for these changes, trying to align as far as possible on common and consistent processes and technical requirements. And the aim being that solar retailers, installers, OEMs should have a consistent experience regardless of which DNSP they're dealing with. Part of this has been aligning across other jurisdictions, including, as Barton says, looking to adopt best practice from South Australia, working closely with Evo Energy to align approaches in New South Wales and ACT, and also working with retailer Synergy, who have recently introduced a CCIP Oz requirement in Western Australia. We're adopting the latest version of CCIP Oz, the technical standard for communication between inverters and DNSP servers, and that was published this year by Standards Australia. And this updated version of the standard doesn't make functional changes, but it was made to address some of the ambiguities in the previous version that led to some different interpretations by different vendors. And that was a cause of some of the compatibility issues that we saw in Victoria. Along with the release of the new standards, a new national testing and certification process for OEMs. And what that means is that OEMs won't have to certify their products individually with each DNSP, as has been the case previously. There'll be a standard commissioning process and a standard on-site capability test for installers, accessed via the new installer portal, and that will be the same across all 3 DNSPs. We're looking to adopt the new national PKI or NEPKey as soon as that's available. And for those who don't know, NEPKey or PKI is the system that provides OEMs with the digital certificates that they need for their equipment to talk to the DNSP servers. And currently, OEMs have to go to each DNSP individually for this, but NEPKey will provide a unified process. We're relying on common inverter settings like the fallback export limit if an inverter loses communications, a common onboarding process for OEMs, a common support model for installers enabled through the new government portal, and combined engagement with industry through sessions like this and through shared industry work. So that's a snapshot of some of the work that's going on to try to ensure that we have a consistent implementation of the new requirements across the 3 New South Wales DNSPs. Be happy to take questions later, but for now, I'll hand over to Adam to talk through the timeline.
Yeah, thanks for that, Bryn. So I'm going to discuss the proposed implementation timeline and talk through some of the reasons we've decided to pursue this staged implementation of the emergency backstop in New South Wales. So New South Wales and the ACT are the last mainland regions in the national electricity market to implement an emergency backstop mechanism. We understand that there were difficulties experienced in the rollout of other programs, and as such, New South Wales distribution businesses have been working closely with the New South Wales Government for the past year to develop a system that we believe will work for installers. In the early stages of the New South Wales project, distribution businesses met with our counterparts in South Australia and Victoria, as Barton mentioned, and Bryn mentioned, to discuss the lessons that they learned from their implementation of their backstop programs. And one of the key learning points from these conversations was the rollout timing and the impact to installers on site who were trying to secure full exports for their customers. As Barton has just shown you, the installer portal will perform a number of functions such as auto-populating the form from the distribution business's connections applications. It will also complete the DER submission on your behalf, and it will also enable you to submit a building commission endorsed CCW. One of the other key points it does do, though, is commences the backstop capability test. So the capability test is the portion of the process where the installer portal will trigger the testing of the internet communications between the distribution business, your inverter manufacturer, and your customer's installation. The test will then make sure the required solar inverters on site react to a request from the distribution businesses to reduce the solar export from the site. We're aware that completing the backstop capability test is more time critical and more complex than other administrative tasks that are required in this process. Hence, we are proposing that all installers will be required to use the installer portal and only install CCIP Oz compliant equipment from the 30th of June 2026. However, we will be staging the mandatory implementation of the backstop capability test through to the 1st of October 2026. As such, each distribution business will select a single cluster of postcodes within one or more neighbouring local government areas. Connection approvals in these areas on or after the 30th of June 2026 will require the backstop capability test to be successfully completed during the installation commissioning. Other postcodes will be listed to commence backstop requirements if approved after the end of July, and more again will be added at the end of August. We believe limiting the number of new applications that are required to complete the capability test will mean that any teething issues we have with our utility servers or other parts of the process, and let's face it, there may be some issues that we will have to navigate with a new system. This will impact on a much smaller group of installers and allow the distribution businesses to work through the issues and solve the problems in a much more controlled manner. We acknowledge that these new backstop requirements will need installers to complete additional tasks on site, and we want to minimise the delay in providing help to you whilst you are waiting on site for a solution, which could be due to an issue with the distribution network systems, or it may be just us needing to provide you with some instructions on how to successfully complete the process. Hence why we believe that staging the capability test is important. By the end of April 2026, distribution businesses will publish on their respective websites a list of postcodes and local government areas that will be subject to the transitional rollout throughout July through to the end of September 2026. This advance notice is so you can design and quote your systems accordingly based on when you expect your connection application to be approved. From the 1st of October, the new backstop requirements will be mandatory statewide and for all new and upgrading solar applications. This means all newly submitted solar connection applications from this date on will only be approved by the distribution businesses if you have advised you will comply with the backstop capability testing requirements. If you have an approval that is exempt from the backstop capability test, please ensure that it is commissioned by the 31st of December 2026. Please note that any new or altered solar installation that was approved under the legacy or postcode exemptions after this date will need to successfully complete the capability test. This may require you to reapply for the connection approval. Only those sites with specific exemptions, such as not having practical access to the internet, will be allowed to commission non-backstop enabled solar installations from the beginning of 2027 onwards. Now, I just want to go into that there's a lot going on. We know we're backstop and we know there's extra work, and we know this is going to bring some additional work for the requirements on the industry.
Adam, I'm sorry, we've lost your audio there. Would you be able to just try again? Just lost you for a minute. I still can't hear you. We'll see if we can get Adam back. Otherwise, we may need someone.
Hello. Yes, sorry.
Oh, there you are. Excellent. Thank you. Thanks everyone for your patience.
Sorry about that. Where did you lose me? Sorry.
About 30 seconds.
Talking about it being tricky time for industry, lots going on.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So appreciate it. Yeah, we appreciate it's a tricky time for industry. But one thing we do want to mention is that there is one of the positives we do see coming out of this is in terms of consumer benefits is the CCPOD's backstop mechanism. And that's the ability for installations to sign up to flexible export limits. In the past, sites have been limited to a fixed level of export due to only a small number of days in the year, effectively capping the amount of export we can have into the network, which could then cause damage to distribution network equipment. By having a flexible export, distribution networks can offer increased levels of export throughout the year on the proviso that they can reduce the export where needed on these few critical days. Whilst all distribution businesses will be required to offer flexible export limits from the 30th of June 2026, each of our businesses will have a different need for the technology. Essential Energy, for one, has many long, skinny electricity lines, which means that systems in their network area may need to have their exports turned down more often. Whereas Ausgrid has comparatively shorter lines and much denser load centres with fewer voltage issues. And hence, we are expecting to limit individual systems much less over the next few years. I might pass on to Hamish now. Thanks, Hamish.
Thanks, Adam. Just on the next slide, thank you. So in terms of keeping yourself updated and keeping ahead of the game in understanding emergency backstop and the CER portal, we currently have available on the Clean Energy Council's Learn Lab a free learning or professional development module available for everyone to go and just get themselves familiar with what's happening in this space. It goes into a lot more detail around what emergency backstop means, around a minimum load system load event, and into what the New South Wales portal is going to look like. So take advantage of this this training that we've got on offer at the moment. It's free. It offers you the CPD points, 20 points, and this is the type of information that we're looking to explore further for further sort of training opportunities as we get further into the build and as we develop through the processes and different requirements of backstop leading into the middle of next year. So next slide, thanks. So where to from here? So the New South Wales Government and the 3 DNSPs have been working very closely together to make sure that we're aligned with the same messaging right across the board. The New South Wales Government have web pages available that further explain the requirements around the CERM portal and emergency backstop. And that then feeds into the customer fact sheets that each of the DNSPs provide as well. And each DNSP is working on their websites to make sure that it aligns with the New South Wales Government's information as well. And then outside of that, we also have our key industry associations that we're working with, the Clean Energy Council, NECA, SEA, Solar Accreditation Australia, and the Smart Energy Council. So we're all trying to work together to make sure that we're delivering the message to you all and that you are getting all the information you need so that you, when we reach that point at the middle of next year where we need to go live with the backstop requirements, that you're well informed and that you understand the requirements that each DNSP and the government are applying to these solar connections. So we do have some portal user training coming up, some troubleshooting guidelines, some customer scripts and frequently asked questions, some commissioning checklists, and some more awareness videos. So keep an eye out for this information, whether it be on the DNSP's websites or the government's websites, but and we will be trying to make sure that you're all informed and that you understand everything from informing the customer and making sure that your customers are well informed and understand what the requirements are, as well as understanding what you have to do to get those solar systems connected to the grid. Thanks. I think we'll head over to Q&A.
Thank you, Hamish. That's right. We're now going to move to the Q&A section of the session. If you have a question, please use the Q&A function on the top menu bar to share it with us. Some of you have already been submitting your questions during the session, so thank you very much. We've been watching them come in and we'll now publish a selection as we answer them. We do have a log of all of the questions that have been submitted today, so please rest assured, even if your question hasn't been published yet, we do have a record of it. If there's anything that we can't answer on the spot today, or if we run out of time, and we've got about 15 minutes here now to get through as many questions as we can, we will come back to you in writing after the session with an answer. Before we get into it, I do want to reiterate our thanks to those of you who already submitted questions ahead of time. A summary of the most common questions and answers is on the screen now with some answers. We will share this with you after the session for you to read more closely. We've also used your questions to help prepare the presentation, as Suruchi mentioned right at the start. So hopefully some of these questions have been answered as we've gone through the session. But if there's anything that we've missed or anything in particular that you wanted us to cover that we maybe haven't in this summary, please feel free to resubmit a question and we'll do our best to get to it. If not today, in writing, we report back to everyone. Okay, so now we're going to get into it. I'm going to start by asking some of the questions. And while I do that, I'll just have this up so that everyone can concentrate on the questions, and don't worry about reading that slide. As I said, we'll send it over to you. But what I'm going to do is ask some questions that have been asked a few times in a few different ways by our participants ahead of the session. We've grouped them up so we can cover as many as we can. And I'll give the first question to Adam. And it's about the phased implementation process. So some people wanted to ask about what the implementation process will look like. We've explained that it's a phased process. Why have we chosen that, and what will that mean for installers?
Yeah, thanks for that, Sophie. Look, we did try to cover off on this as much as we could in the presentation, because this question has come up a lot coming in up to this presentation, and also before from a lot of installers we've spoken to. However, to recap, so installer impacts are a key concern, and why a staged approach has been chosen. But you also need to know we need to still get on with getting the requirements underway, as we're one of the last jurisdictions to implement a backstop. And we're seeing more minimum system load events on our network each year. So this implementation will play a significant role in the future management of our networks, and it will assist us in being able to connect further consumer energy resources to our respective networks as well.
Same as any other product.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Adam. Next, let's hear from you, John. I'm keen to understand, well, some of our participants were keen to understand how the compliance of existing systems will be treated when installing new systems alongside them. So someone asked about this during the session as well. What will it mean for existing sites?
Yeah, thanks. So the use of this CE puddle would be required from mid next year for all new and upgraded systems up to and including 200 kilowatts. So that's that's going to be rolled in second half of 2026, as Adam has alluded to. So while the new inverters or altered inverters will need to meet new requirements, pre-backstop existing inverter systems which have not been modified will not need to be upgraded to the CSIP Oz backstop requirements. And the installation of those won't need to go through the portal. A practical sort of note to that will be that probably existing inverters that are not required to be backstop enabled will likely probably be turned off during the capability testing of those new inverters. So that'd be the way that'd be handled.
Sophie's just dropped off, but we have another question that was around how does emergency backstop mechanism interact with existing programs such as flexible exports? So I can speak to that one while we wait for Sophie. The good news is, essentially from a plumbing perspective, flexible exports and emergency backstop use the same pipes, if you think about it in that way. So the same commissioning processes, the same capability tests enable both. It really just comes down to the plan that the customer wants to go on. So if they don't want to go on a flexible plan, then they'd stay on a fixed limit export, and we would only limit it in those emergency event situations. For a flexible customer, then we'd send active control set points more regularly. And the way flexible exports would work is that think of it as the bumper bars in a bowling alley. They're the outer limits of what the network can handle. So a VPP or an aggregator can still send price signals within those limits. We're only setting those outer limits for the network.
Looks like we're still getting Sophie back. Suruchi, I think there was a question that was probably one that you can handle, where what we've learnt from other jurisdictions and how we're doing it differently.
Yes, I can definitely answer that one, John. I think the key to that is we've learned what to do, and most importantly, we've also learned what not to do. So we've brought all of that together, and out of that, couple of things we have adopted, as Barton mentioned, a unified approach. We're here together as a government and the 3 DNSPs so that it is a very streamlined system available for you, which enables you to do a number of things, to lodge CCEW at the same time, to enable you to report to the MODR register, and then to satisfy your obligation to enroll into Emergency Backstop Mechanism, the change which is coming next year. So we are equipping you in a very streamlined way through this central CER installer portal. And on top of that, I think the additional couple of things we've made sure that we would do to make this a good change, an easy change for industry, is to provide you plenty of time to manage that. We are equipping you with lots of training and material. There'll be a user training towards the early next year, and there are a number of fact sheets and the awareness training course, which was just mentioned before by my fellow speaker. So we're trying to equip you with as much as information as we can. I think the other key things I would like to mention is from the learnings from Victoria specifically, we've tried to not bring this change in one go as mandatory to you. We'll be providing a period as a pilot program. So from April onwards, there'll be a pilot program which will be rolled out, which means the installers will be able to come, try, enroll in the pilot program, and really experience the CER installer portal so that they are equipped from when it becomes mandatory.
There was a question, thanks, Richie. There was a question regarding a customer's connectivity, so internet connection with the backstop requirements. And like most solar systems or new solar systems that are being installed currently for customers, generally that connection is reliant on an internet connection. Specifically with the backstop requirements, that will require that internet connection to be available. Now, there are certain circumstances, especially in Essential Energies network, where there's outlying areas and there are telecommunication or coverage issues, and each DNSPs have got a mechanism to work through that in terms of the application of that situation. But in general, the backstop requirement does need a stable internet connection for it to operate appropriately.
That's a really good point, Hamish. Oh, we've got Sophie back.
I'm sorry, just like everyone else with this crazy weather in New South Wales, maybe a bit like Adam, lost me for a second there, which always comes at the worst possible time. So thank you so much, everybody, for stepping in and for answering some of those questions in my absence. So I understand we've covered a lot of what we wanted to in this period now. We might start to get to some of the questions that we've started to publish on the right-hand side there. So we've talked about legacy systems, I think we've covered. Flexible exports we've covered. Why don't we talk about VPP providers? Don there has asked how flexible, how the backstop and how the CEI installer portal might interact with someone who has a VPP. Who might be best placed to answer that? Maybe you, Barton?
Yeah, sure. I'll jump in. I kind of spoke to that in my previous while you were off, Sophie, which was that bumper bar analogy, which is around an aggregator will still be able to do things with price responsiveness. And what we find is that more often than not, the network signals as well as the price signals do align. So there's not a lot of contradiction or cutovers. I might even just add on to one of the Hamish's points there around, if a site that doesn't have internet, how that can be exempt. Someone just asked in the questions around new constructions where a homeowner's not in yet, and what we're looking in those cases is practically you hotspot your phone or a connection for that inverter to do the connectivity and prove that it's been connected correctly, and then leave that site without internet until the homeowner comes in and connects their own modem. So hopefully that speaks to that question as well.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. Someone else who was anonymous has asked about how do we know what is CSIP Oz compliant equipment? Bryn, is that one that you might answer?
Yeah, for sure. So the short answer is that the Clean Energy Council maintains a list of inverters that are compliant to CSIP Oz. They do that today, and they'll be updating that list with the introduction of the new version of the standard.
Okay,
so
awesome.
the DNSPs will use that list when they're to determine which inverters are CSIP Oz compliant.
Okay. Malik has asked about systems greater than 200 kVA. Who can answer the question about that? Whether that would require SCADA, which I'm going to guess is SCADA.
SCADA. Yeah, I'll jump in.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks,
so
Barton.
and similar to Rama's questions around with the portal, what are we going to do for greater than 200 kilowatts? So although the government mandate is only applying for systems up to 200 to use the portal, our intent is to still use the portal because it is still relevant for systems greater than 200. It then comes down to each of the utilities connection standards for that. So I can speak to Endeavour that we're looking to still utilise CSIP protocols up to 1.5 megawatts, and before we then mandate into the SCADA arrangements. So I think it'll come down to understanding each of the standards in the DNSPs, but wherever CSIP will be used, the portal can still be used for a lot of the commissioning and automatic self-serve purposes.
Okay, and related to that, is there a threshold on the system size? This is another question that we've had.
I'm assuming that refers to like an upper limit of what would be able to be used. I sort of spoke to that, at least my understanding, unless Adam or Hamish, is for us 1.5 megawatts would be the CSIP limit at this stage.
Excellent.
Yeah, we're much in line with that. In terms of a low voltage connection, you're pretty much limited to about 1.5 meg anyhow.
Yeah.
Great. One of the questions that we had asked ahead of the session was about the support that will be available to installers once the portal does go live, and in particular looking for some indication of the kind of human support that will be available. Adam or Hamish, did you want to talk to that?
Yeah, I'm more than happy to chime in on that one. So yeah, all the DNSPs, we're training up our staff. So we've got contact centres, and we've got change managers and trainers who are now working with those. We're actually looking to also likely employ some additional people, especially in the kickoff peak in June, July next year, so that we have people available that you can speak to when issues come up on site. So we're, apart from having other resources available, through our internet and videos and stuff, we are looking to have people that you could actually have a conversation with as well.
Excellent. Okay, thank you so much. We do have a lot of questions that have come through. We've done our best to answer a good chunk of them now, but we do only have 2 minutes left, and there's one more slide that we wanted to share. So what I will just reiterate is that anyone who asked questions earlier that we didn't have the chance to cover, we will come back to you in writing. So after this session, a recording will be available for people who missed the session. We'll also share the slides, and we'll share a list of questions that maybe we didn't get a chance to cover in our kind of 15-minute Q&A today. So thank you very much for everyone who submitted their questions. This is our last slide here. I'm not sure if Suruchi, you wanted to add anything further here as we wrap up?
I can definitely close it off, Sophie. I'm hoping that this webinar has equipped, the industry today for the upcoming change. You heard a bit of a recap, I'd say, is you heard about the next year changes, which will be coming on how you install and register solar systems. You'll be required to be enabled for emergency backstop. So John took us through why we need emergency backstop mechanism, and Bryn took us through how we are ensuring that end-to-end alignment in New South Wales, as well as interstate as well, moving down the track. Barton took us through how Portal will come together and support you and how we are all working together to make this work. And I'd say very importantly, Adam took us through key dates, which you must be wondering when everything's changing. All that information will be available. In addition, when Hamish mentioned a number of resources available for you to navigate this change. So I really recommend that if you haven't already completed the awareness training, for you to enroll it. It's a free CPD training through Clean Energy Council. There's this barcode there on the screen. You should be able to jump onto CEC website and get that training completed. It's got loads of information for you to look through, which will be partly what you've heard today and a bit more to that. If you have any questions, please reach out to us as the government, New South Wales Department of Climate Change, Energy, Environment and Water. We are here to make sure that we support this change together with the New South Wales distributed network service providers. Thank you, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. A very good evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.